when I turned 14, there was a very big bombing. It was a holiday or something. And I was at home with my younger brother, 6 years younger. I was 14, he was 8. And he told me that he's going to meet his friend in the next neighborhood. So he's going to hop on the bus. And he left. And 3 minutes later, there was a bomb. And it took me a few seconds to calibrate, and I understood what happened, so I ran out. I was essentially first on the scene where 2 buses exploded, and there were tens of people all over the street, body parts, people burning, body parts on the tree, just horrific. And I was first there, and obviously screaming and crying and whatnot, and I was looking for my brother. And that incident brought my emotional system to a complete shutdown. Now, in professional terms, that's called PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder. And with that, I ventured into life.
Dan, how are you, brother?
Awesome. Very excited to be here. Thank you for that.
I'm more excited probably than you for you to be here because many people don't know unless they follow deeper into my life, like who you are and like the significance you have on my life and how you've helped me to heal in so many different ways. So I'm truly honored to have you here on my podcast, for me to interview you now and talk to you. But I always start my podcast off with a quote. Quotes have helped me get through the most difficult times of my life. And maybe we can talk about that later, like why do you think that is? But I want to start with this quote that Shireen, my significant other, picked. Because of her, you and I met. Mm-hmm. And because of you, her and I have been able to grow a strong relationship. And, just she's an amazing human being. So, and a lot of that reason because of, you, the work you've done with her and helped her. So I told her to pick one, and it's great because it made me really think. So I'd love to know what this quote means to you when you hear it. The smaller your reality, the more convinced you are that you know everything. What does that mean to you?
A description of my life.
Perfect then. So she did well. Huh?
Yeah, it's, throughout my life, I love learning. That's part of my passion. I love learning all kinds of stuff from all kinds of domains. I enjoy it. And there was a point where I get an idea of what life is all about. And boy, I was wrong. And since then, and funny enough, I was 22. Wow. I was like, okay, I get the hang of it. Yeah. And since then, it's just the more I learn, the more I understand that I know nothing. And so that's kind of what resonates in me listening to this quote.
And that's interesting because from my perspective, it's like I get that, like the wisest man is the one that knows he knows nothing. I think Socrates said it. Mm-hmm. But for you to say that, it's very powerful because you know so much. I mean, it's like well more than I do, but it's very interesting to hear you say that. It's very humbling, like to hear that, and I know how powerful that is to have that mental perspective. But going back, like to your 20-year-old self, and maybe even younger, I'm interested in who that person was, because I know who you are today, and you talked a little bit about your past, but I know that there's certain things that we go through in life, and I call them impact moments that shift our lives in different ways. And I've talked about mine in so many ways, so I really wanted to hear about that because I think it's so important for people to hear that may be going through something or been through some of the similar stuff you've been through, to understand that you can get back onto the right path and do good things in the world and help others. So I'd love to learn more about your past.
Thank you. I know where to start, to be honest.
I would say the first back as far back as you can remember, the first major impact event in your life, maybe?
So I was born to a Jewish family that survived all kinds of pretty horrific experiences on both ends, my maternal and paternal. In kind of, the beginning and the middle of the last century in Eastern and Central Europe. Before the Holocaust, before the World Wars, during and after. And I was born in Lithuania. And that was part of the USSR at the time, Russia. And Jews were basically prosecuted, third-class citizens. And my family survived starvation and separation. And what it did, it ingrained a very significant and very deep fear, existential fear, into everyone's psyche. And when I turned 3, there was an opening, and the Russian government allowed some Jews to leave to Israel. And my family, in 2 ways, managed to get out. But that heritage, that fear stayed in the way I was brought up. And I grew up in Israel, in Jerusalem, a small city. Maybe some people heard about it.
Yeah.
At the center of a lot of turmoil consistently in the last couple of millennia. And in the 70s, which funny or sad enough, it was very much like today. A lot of violence, a lot of horrific violence, bombing and fighting and whatnot. And that's essentially the setup in which I grew up. So on one hand, I had a very happy childhood. And maybe we'll get to it later. I always perceived my childhood as great. I had a good time. There was no problem. Just to discover later in my life that the prime force defining who I am is fear, is deep existential fear. And when I started my healing journey, at some point I realized that essentially since the age of 6, I encountered death, somebody dying, firsthand, up close. Like I saw somebody dying every single year as of the age of 6. Right?
And these were like murders or like bombings? Or
all of the above.
Okay.
Suicide, bombings, car accidents, you name it. All kinds of violence. But my psyche considered my childhood as great, safe, happy, you name it. All good. As I evolved, as I changed, obviously it was something that, and this was the setup to what I do today and taught me a lot, but only after I started unpacking my own stuff. Our suppression mechanisms are very, very deep and essential to our existence, to our survival. You can't function in such an immense fear. So obviously I suppressed all of it, but that was the underlying force, right? And it dictated a big part, the lion part of how my personality evolved, right? And I remember myself as a 17, 18-year-old asking myself, like, what is this world I'm going into? How do people survive constantly being afraid for their personal safety? Just, I don't know if I'm, middle class or used a lot of public transport and the the most common thing in terms of the type of terror that was experienced then was bus bombing.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know if you get on a bus if it's going to explode on you or not.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't know, because it happens, twice, 3 times a week. Now, how do you cope with it when I started using buses when I was 6 years old.
Wow.
So how do you deal with it? You just suppress it to a level that it's just not a thing. Right. But that created a personality that lived very much in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I learned through that is you don't know if tomorrow gonna come.
Yeah.
And it made me fearless. The suppression got to such a level that I felt no fear. Had no sensation of fear, which allowed me to have experiences later in life that very few people had. And what the fear did to me, and what I realized it throughout my evolution, my healing, and the work I do today, is that it suppresses your overall emotional system. So it kind of dials down the volume on how you can use the emotional system.
Yeah.
And the emotional system is the center of our experience. We're a sensing being. So as my emotional system was going gradually to mute,
Mm-hmm.
I started sensing less. And when you sense less, you also sense fearless, and you become fearless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I turned 14, essentially my emotional system was shut down. And as I said, I encountered death every year. When I turned 14, there was a very big bombing. It was a holiday or something, and I was at home with my younger brother, 6 years younger. I was 14, he was 8, and he told me that he's going to meet his friend in the next neighborhood, so he's gonna hop on the bus, and he left. And 3 minutes later, there was a bomb that, from the scare, I went flying backwards and found myself staring at the ceiling with my legs up.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a few seconds to calibrate, and I understood what happened, so I ran out. And when I ran out, I was essentially first on the scene where 2 buses exploded. The bomb was in the back of one bus, and there was a bus standing right behind. It was so big that both buses exploded. And there were tens of people all over the street, body parts, people burning, body parts on the tree. Just horrific. And I was first there, and obviously screaming and crying and whatnot. And I was looking for my brother. And luckily he was late. So he ran after the bus as it exploded, as it started moving. And he was blown backwards, but he wasn't physically harmed. And that incident brought my emotional system to a complete shutdown. Now, in professional terms, that's called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And with that, I ventured into life. So
I want to stop there for a second, because I think that many people can kind of get an idea of where your life would go from there, experiencing trauma like that at such a young age. And I wanted to ask a couple questions.
Sure.
One that just came to me, which was, how do you explain when somebody is like late to getting somewhere where like they would have otherwise been killed? Or how do you explain like how there's like that decision to do something that you've never done before, but you make it, and that ultimately saved your life? Like, how do you explain that?
Those are the moments that many people identify as the divine hand intervention, right? People that were about to board a plane on 9/11 and last minute missed it, or were late to work before the towers exploded, or examples like that. There's many of those. Those are the outstanding moments where people identify. It's kind of how I was never late to work. That day I was late and the towers went down. You know? And many people have experiences like that or hear about them. This is only the tip of the iceberg, in my view. This is how reality actually works, except we don't recognize it. When you are in a rush somewhere and you get on the highway and you get stuck in traffic, or you drive behind some grandma that drives 25 miles an hour on the highway, right? And you get upset. This is the same force. It's the same force that creates those experiences, right? Now, how deep you want to go here? You know?
I want to go deep. All
right.
I feel that. I literally was like, yesterday was running late somewhere. I was frustrated, and I had a moment that was like, well, maybe let me just relax. Maybe I'm not meant to be where I need to be yet, even if I'm late.
Exactly.
But I want to go deeper than that, because I feel like it's something even deeper, and most people can understand that aspect of it. Like, okay, maybe you're not meant to be there yet, but I know there's something deeper there, and you're the only person that can really explain it. Like, because we've had these conversations, and so it's just so fascinating to me. But yeah, let's go deep on this.
All right. So, if you talk to any physicist today, right, they'll tell you that everything is made of the same components. This table, this microphone, my shirt, myself, you, our brain, the stars, anything, same material. Same atoms or subatomic particles, you name it, right? How come? On the other end, if you talk to a spiritual teacher, they'll tell you that everything is one, right? Except that people don't fully comprehend what those statements mean. We all say them. Everything is one, we're one.
We're all connected.
We're all connected. It's all statements, but people don't go deep enough to understand what does actually means, right? So let's tackle it from different angles. Right? Our entire universe is made out of the same building blocks. So really, what separates my skin, the outer layer of my skin, and let's say when I put my hand at the table, what actually separates? It's the same material. So what defines where I end and the table begins? Or replace the table with the air around you. There is air around you. So where exactly is the separation? Because it's the same material. So why this atom, or let's say subatomic particle, let's say a quark, is part of my skin and another one is part of the air around me? And how do they interact, really?
It's beyond my pay grade. I have no idea.
Now, if you think about it in a different way a little bit, think of the entire universe as one big jello. Well, an infinite tub of jello.
Okay.
Right? Because everything is made of the same jello. So what defines what is me, what is not me, what is mine, what is not mine? Right? So there is something, right, that creates those definitions. That something is essentially the force or the power that creates our entire reality, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Right? On the other end, there is the whole domain of researching consciousness. Right? And what is consciousness?
And
Right.
this is where you take me into a deeper thing, because consciousness for me, when I think of it, and many people probably think the same way, is like anything that has to do with like thinking in your brain, and you're aware, a mental awareness of where you are in the world or how you think. Like being a conscious leader would be just being aware and empathetic toward people as a leader, understanding. So a deep understanding. That's how I kind of look at consciousness in a lot of people, but I know it's going to get deeper than that.
All right. So let's take some examples, right? Consciousness is, if you look at the dictionary, it's a form of awareness, right? You're aware of something. Right? Now, there are different levels of consciousness. Think of a sunflower, right? Sunflower, in the morning turns to the sun this way, and in the afternoon turns the other way because the sun moved. So the sunflower is aware of the movement of the sun, right? It responds to it, so there's some awareness, right? Take the microbiome in your gut, right? It responds differently to different types of food. So the microbiome is aware of the type of the food, right? Responds differently. Yeah. There's awareness. Except that those levels of awareness do not have free choice. The sunflower does not wake up one morning and say, forget it. Today I'm not turning.
Yeah, exactly.
Not going to do it.
Yeah.
There's no free choice, right?
Yeah.
Plants, they don't have free choice. They grow. Right? Yeah. You give them the right conditions, they grow. You don't, or nature doesn't, they don't. It's a form of awareness, but with no free choice. Gradually, by the way, there's today research that discovers that mushrooms have certain level of free choice.
Interesting.
Right?
What do you mean by that?
Mushrooms, there is a recent research that shows that mushrooms can grow and figure out a maze. Wow. And they can communicate, fungi can communicate under the ground. There's I don't know how validated it is, but essentially the whole planet is wired around with essentially fungi that communicates all across the planet. Wow. Right? So there's all kinds of cutting edge science that challenges our understanding of how other types of awareness actually function. And some of them have greater level of awareness. Take animals, take lions, right? Or other predators. Usually they don't hunt for sport. They hunt when they're hungry, and when they're not hungry, they can be very peaceful with other types of animals that otherwise they would eat them. Right. There's enough proof of that. Yeah. So there's limited free choice. There's some exceptions, so there's limited free choice. The organism that so-called has the most free choice is humans. Right. But there's a big question mark. Is it really a free choice? And maybe we'll get to it later. So now, our consciousness is, where is it? It's not in our body. Because your body is very different than when you were 6 or when you were 20. Yeah. Right? And depends on what research you read, they'll tell you that most of the cells are replaced. They're rejuvenated. So it's not the same actual cells. Right. But you have a seamless experience, one uniform experience of your entire life. So what is experiencing your life? It's not your body. Right? So it is your consciousness, your awareness. Right? So tie everything together. What we are is consciousness, which is an awareness with a choice. Right? Okay. Now, if you go by any essentially any religion, any mystical tradition, any ancient teaching, any of it, everything tells you that essentially all our consciousnesses, in kind of day-to-day speak, our souls, they come from the same place, the same origin. There's one consciousness, the consciousness of one, which in religion is called God, in physics is called the field, doesn't matter what the name. There's one out of which the individual souls emerge, right? And I can tell you that people that experience enlightenment and other forms of out-of-body experiences, they all testify the same experience, that they connect to this one soul, then they come back to this separated reality.
And have anybody ever explained what that feels like, or what's that experience like when you connect with the entire the collective consciousness?
Essentially, anyone that had that and decided to have a microphone in front of them. You can find many testaments for those experiences, right? Online. They're full of it.
Have you experienced that?
Yes. Yeah. So when you experience that, your perspective of your reality radically changes because you experience the transition. And it's an experience not only of the mind, it's an experience of your consciousness, of your entirety. See? All right, so now let's tie it together. Right? On one hand, our physical reality is made uniformly out of the same building blocks.
Right.
On the other hand, we know that what we are is consciousness, and we emerge from the one consciousness. Now, we can talk about that process later. So really what happens is this one consciousness creates our reality through our individual experiences. So think of it going back to the huge infinite Jello tub. And think of this tub is the one consciousness. And out of this tub, there are individual figurines that emerge. Now, they're still made out of the same Jello, but each one has a little bit different shape. Same characteristic, but different shape. Except that each figurine does not recognize the fact that it's emerging from the same Jello.
Right.
And in its experience, the world is full of the other figurines and it's interacting with them. This is the human race. See? Now, our reality is created through our consciousness. Right? So, going back to the fact that the entire universe, entire physical reality is made out of the same building blocks. Some force, some power needs to arrange it. How does that happen? It happens through the individual consciousnesses. Each one of us. So now think of each of those figurines as a bubble, a soap bubble, right? Floating in space.
Right.
Each bubble has an experience inside of it, right? But there's the inner experience, when you talk to yourself, how you feel, what you dream about. Right? But there's the outer experience, this. This experience is intersection between two figurines. There's a touch point, right? The touch point creates the physical reality. So every touch point, every physical reality, let me kind of tie it to some more ancient traditions. In the Jewish tradition, there are 365 commandments, really. There's the 10 commandments that are famous, but there's 365 kind of mitzvot, it's called, right? The first one, the ones that's ordered, many people don't know, but the first one is to bless the moon on the new moon cycle. the blessing of the moon has to be done by 2 people minimum. Why? Why is that the first blessing?
Yeah.
Why is that the first commandment, really? Because that's the foundation. When 2 consciousness, 2 figurines, 2 awarenesses with a choice agree on something in the physical reality, that creates the physical reality. Understand?
Yeah.
So you bless the moon, you have to have 2 people minimum, because you agree that this is the beginning of the moon cycle. And that's the foundation of many other things in our universe.
Yeah.
Understand?
Because one person alone, it can't do it.
You've been in seclusion for a long period.
Yeah.
You know how hard it is to keep your mental state,
Right.
and sanity.
Yeah.
Now imagine you would be born into that.
Yeah.
There's no reference.
Yeah.
You don't know what's right and wrong. You don't know what up and what down.
Yeah.
You just don't know. You get lost. So you have to have the intersection with another consciousness. And that's the beginning of everything in our physical reality. Think of anything. Think of this table, right?
Yeah.
This table, somebody had an idea to make this table.
Yeah.
To make it, he had at some point to think about it. So there was an incentive, there was a notion. Then you need to actually form a thought. Then you have to verbalize the thought to yourself, put it in words inside. And then you have to talk to somebody about making it.
Yeah.
And then the action follows. And that is true for anything in our physical reality. And that is how our physical reality is created. So it's created by God, what religious people call God, but it's created through our individual consciousness, right? Through the terms that we agree on.
Right.
When you were a baby, your mother sat you down and showed you this is grass.
Yeah.
And over time, you learned how grass behaves and how it shows up in your life. That process of her teaching you is the transformation and the harnessing of your consciousness into the global consciousness that keeps creating grass on the planet, or plants, or buildings, or cars, or you name it, anything, or the stars. There's an agreement, unspoken, but there's an agreement.
And what's the foundation of that agreement? Like, because
language.
Right.
We don't notice it. It's not that there's negotiation.
yeah.
There's an agreement, because when we taught language, we actually taught concepts. Right? So you have a very firm concept of what a building is, or what a car is, right? And throughout human evolution, those things transform. It's okay. You know?
Yeah.
But think about things that they're a little bit more fluid.
Right.
For instance, love.
Yeah.
For instance, friendship. Right? There are terms that are a lot more fluid. So you have a lot more variety and people's behavior and manifestation becomes, as humanity evolves, becomes more and more varied.
Yeah.
Right? So that process is what creates those moments in our day-to-day, and the exceptions that we kind of, wow, how did that happen? It's the same thing. Because that particular soul was not meant to dissolve at that moment.
Why us, like humans? I mean, because as you mentioned, the sunflower and animals and everything else doesn't have what we have. They're not, our makeup is different. We're unique, right? We have a consciousness, and and I'm sure other beings have free will, but our level is different. We have the ability to like imagine and dream and visualize and then pursue that, where other beings on earth don't. Like, why do you think why us? Like, is there like because I mean, are we like, I guess when you talk about God in the field, are we that as the, just in human form? Like, because I really like, that's kind of like a question I've always had is like, okay, well, out of all the things in the world, all the planets in the galaxy, right? We're the only one that was like life, or we're just alone, basically. We don't know. There's most likely going to be other beings out there. I don't know, maybe. But so far up to date, nobody's really found anything. No other humans or anything like it. So in the whole entire universe of what we know of it, why us? Like, what makes us so special? Like, why are we here? What is the point of all this? The existential question. What is the meaning of all this?
So the simple answer is, I'm not sure I have the right answer. Right? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But from what my experience indicates, and from what I learned throughout my life, and that goes back to many ancient philosophies, traditions, and religions. If you look at the origins of any major religion or any religion today, they all talk about the same thing, just different languages. Mm-hmm. The one consciousness has a desire to experience itself. Now, in consciousness form, as consciousness, the jello tub cannot experience its own qualities. Okay? And that is the story of creation. All right? And from all the traditions that I studied, or all the religions I studied, the ones that speaks about it the clearest is the Kabbalistic teachings, which is essentially the foundation of the Jewish, and because of that, Christianity and Jesus' teaching. He was focusing on one form, but it was essentially talking about the whole thing. Consciousness, when he was talking to the Father, that's the consciousness. The one consciousness wants to experience itself. Now, how would that experience itself? It has to, its own qualities. It has to disengage and create an experience in which it rediscovers itself. See? Yeah. So when we are coming into our human experience, we do not know or remember our divine self.
That's deep.
Now, we mentioned earlier that this life experience that we have is not an experience of the body. It's an experience of the soul, right? The soul is that part that is connected to the infinite tub, to the one consciousness, right? That's the connection. So our lifetime is a journey of the soul. Right? All the experiences, your childhood does not exist right now, but it exists in your memory. Now, who's the one remembering it? It's your soul, right? Yeah. So you accumulate, and each one of us accumulate experiences. Those experiences teach us different lessons, right? If you go far enough and explore yourself, this is why the journey of the soul is inward, not outward. And you go far enough, you start discovering the divine parts of your own being. See? That's why it's called a journey of enlightenment or awakening or self-discovery. All those terms, they come for a reason, to discover that, to describe this process. Right? Now, if you go far enough, you start realizing, this is why it's called also self-realization, you realize that you have qualities that you did not realize previously.
Right.
And those qualities are of the divine nature. And the further you go, the more you discover.
Mm-hmm.
See?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know as far as I got, I don't know what's ahead of me,
Yeah.
but this is by far the most fascinating experience of my life. And I think in general, possible.
And getting there to where you're at now in this experience, a lot happened. So like going back to your 14-year-old self, going into the world with everything you went through, all the experiences, all the things you saw, you carry that with you into your teenage years and into becoming a man. Talk about who that was, like who you became, who were you at that age, into the becoming of who you are now. And how did you, for me, it was solitary confinement. There was that moment of shift when everything changed. And so where was that moment for you along that journey?
Yeah. So when I set myself out into the world, I had dreams like everyone else. I had dreams of what life is all about and how I'm going to discover, how I'm going to be. And my dream was to have the most adventures I can. Mm-hmm. As I said, my emotional system at that point was completely shut down. I mean, it got to the point that when I was 15, I used to spend time staring into my own eyes in the mirror, looking for signs that I'm a machine. Because I couldn't believe, because I remember there's such a thing that's feelings, but I couldn't understand how come I don't have them. I didn't feel anything, there was a phase I didn't feel anything towards my family. Now, I knew I loved them, but I didn't feel the love, right? I didn't feel anything towards myself, just didn't feel. So with that, I decided that, okay, so I need to have adventures, because only when I have very high adrenaline injection, I feel alive. Yeah. So I started engaging in all kinds of extreme activities. And I was a very curious guy, as you can understand. Yeah. So I always looked for the things that the furthermost from what I know. And that drove me to do trips to the most remote parts of the world. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be in places that, I was walking in shorts and kids came and were touching my legs, the hair on my legs, because they never seen a person with hair on their legs. Wow. Or I've been in places that, of course, there's no cell reception, but there's no electricity. And I had the experience of reading a book with a candlelight. If you think about it, it's something we don't do. Yeah. And it's a very special experience. Yeah. They're simple things. Not because I thought about it, just because there wasn't. Yeah. And all kinds of things like that. Exchanging goods or services with people that had no ability to communicate. So experience like that, and it enriched my understanding of life. Yeah. And at some point, I kind of like, okay, got the idea, kind of a little bit domesticated, and had a pretty successful career in high tech. And I was basically fulfilling all my dreams. And when I turned 40, I basically did kind of, okay, let's do the P&L up to this point. Right. And I realized that I achieved everything I set to achieve by the age of 50. I was very calculated, I was very cerebral, And I had a list of goals I want to achieve by 50. And I achieved them by 40. I had everything I wanted in life.
Yeah.
Right.
Were you in Israel at the time, or
No, I
in the
was
States?
I was
Okay.
already living in the States. The decision to leave Israel had to do with, I said to myself, I'm not willing to spend my life living in such immense fear.
Yeah.
I don't agree with essentially what is happening and with the majority of the population.
Yeah.
And it's my home, but I don't feel at home. I do feel at home, but I don't feel at home. I do feel at home, but I don't feel belong because I don't agree. I don't agree with the constant violence. You can't blame the other party. It takes two to tango.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think life is about living in fear. And I realized that there's no, and that was now 30 years ago or more. I said, I don't want to spend my life in fear, and I don't want to raise my kids in fear. And that was before I had kids. So my future is not here. I don't resonate with the ideals that the majority of the population resonates with. So, So I was just looking for the opportunity, and having a career in high tech was part of my calculated move to create a foundation to leave the country. And that's exactly what happened. So I was living in Boston. I was running a successful startup. At that point, it was already a pretty big company. I was a celebrated CEO. One day I got a call out of the blue. I was in, my secretary comes in, somebody from the Forbes magazine wants to talk to you. It's like, me, Forbes, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's like apparently somebody nominated me, and I got selected as top 24 innovators by the Forbes magazine in 2007. So I was celebrated. I had my ego was inflated, all good.
Yeah.
Had everything in life. And when I turned 40, I realized there's a discrepancy. Because on one hand, I have everything I ever wanted. On the other hand, I don't feel fulfilled and relaxed and happy inside the way I expected to be when I achieve all those things. So something is wrong with that equation, because I've been working hard and I achieved everything I wanted. So I should be happy. I should be content. I should feel relaxed and expanded and celebrate life. But I don't feel all of it.
Yeah.
So there's something wrong with that paradigm.
And that's powerful, because there's so many young people and older that think that if they get to all that, they'll be happy. Exactly. Or well, if I just get there, then everything will be fine. And you're here explaining how you did that and realized that you didn't feel fulfilled.
Exactly. And I said to myself, okay, so if that's the case, then there's something wrong. Either I didn't achieve enough, or the whole paradigm is off. My gut feeling told me that it's the second, not the first. Yeah. Because I could see the trajectory of, okay, I'll achieve more, and then what? I had more than I needed anyway. So what's the point of this? Yeah. And that set me on a journey inwards. Right? Now, there were other signs in my life that told me that I have a problem, because loved my family, my kids, to the extent I could feel an emotion, right? Yet there were instances that I felt irritated and I couldn't explain to myself why. So I realized there's something going on inside of me that I don't understand. And that sent me on the journey inward. And when I attended university, I studied double major. One of them was psychology. So I kind of started there. Didn't get me very far. I started looking at other things. I started studying all kinds of ancient and mystical tradition. I always had an attraction to those. So I started looking into this, started basically anywhere I could look. Yeah. Long story short, 7 years into this journey, I realized, with the help of somebody that was willing to work with me a little bit, that I have PTSD. And that was a major aha moment. And once I realized that is the issue, and I started studying trauma for my own purpose, nothing official. But I had enough of a foundation, and I started researching and talking to people and basically consuming anything that even made remote sense. And very quickly I discovered that there's no cure for PTSD, meaning there is symptomatic treatment. So you can reduce the symptoms, but people with PTSD, they don't get into thriving in life. They don't get to a state of feeling expanded, feeling fulfilled.
Yeah.
You just mask the symptoms so they can function in society. And being an entrepreneur, I said, that's not good enough for me.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just going to DIY it. And I started creating my own treatment and experimenting on myself, while, again, keep studying everything. And I would say 90% of what I did didn't work. But some did. And gradually, I started seeing the change. I started behaving differently. I forced myself and I taught myself how to modify my behavior. And that created different emotions and different results and different reality. And gradually it started shifting. And kind of things started transforming. And that's kind of, it's obviously, it's an endless process, because rewiring our own system, our operating system, one, it's an endless process because we're evolving organisms. And two, it's part of your personality. So you get into the line of what is you and what is not you, again, on the inside.
Yeah.
So that, when you reach that point, it's a whole new degree of freedom, because now you're free to shape yourself the way you want, not the way it came out.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm still work in progress, and I plan to always be.
Yeah.
But now I'm keep creating my new me.
And before, because that segues well into the work you do, and maybe that's your change, the change you created within yourself and through the different practices.
Absolutely.
Probably inspire that for you to help others. But, I wanted to talk about I guess I'll say this, your soulmate, your wife.
My better half.
Your better half. Yeah. Good man. Smart man. But no, seriously, like, I know that in some way, then in that time frame, she came into your life, or you came into her life. And did that have like a big part in like you working on yourself? And also, the big question is like, how do you know when you've found your own soulmate? Like, how, for the people out there that are like on this search, almost everybody in the world, like, to find their person. Because I see that in you and in your wife, and it gives a lot of people around you guys hope that they can find that as well and create that. So how did that happen for you?
The divine hand.
Yeah, seriously, yeah. Destiny,
so,
right?
I'm thinking where to start. First off, when you meet that person, you know. You just know.
Is it a heart thing, a mind thing?
A heart thing. It's your entire being thing.
Okay.
But you just know.
Yeah.
Now, what do I mean? We all get burnt. So trauma is universal. I maybe had, because the only difference between PTSD and other forms of trauma is kind of that's an extreme form. So in my case, it became an advantage because it took me from a complete shutdown of my emotional system to bring it to function and keep pushing it. Other forms of trauma create maybe partial shutdown, but it's the same process.
Mm-hmm.
So we all get hurt. We all experience pain. And that pain has different effects throughout our system. One of them is we trust ourselves less, right? Because if this happened, if that happened, so I need to be careful here, I need to be careful there. There's all kinds of reactions, and we don't trust, in many cases, our decision, our ability to go with what we feel. Because again, our emotional system, when we get hurt, the emotional system get a little bit turned off.
Yeah.
Never mind if completely, but it's less. It's not fully functional. Now, love is an emotional experience. You feel it through your emotional system, not through your mind, right? If somebody thinks of their so-called love through the list of qualities they have, then it's not love. Because that's a mind function.
Yeah.
It's you creating a P&L, pros and cons, right? That's not love. Love, you just feel. Now, you need to be able to trust your system that this is it. Except that most of us don't trust. Yeah. So we don't allow, because we've been hurt, because we've been betrayed, because we've been cheated on, because a relationship failed, because of a bazillion reasons. Doesn't matter why, right? Now, my wife is the real reason for my transformation, because it's the first time where I actually felt my emotional system at the extent that it was possible then, and it was beyond everything I experienced before. I just saw her, and I was like, this is it.
Yeah.
Right? And that experience was the catalyst to my transformation, because on surface, there was nothing wrong with my life. I mean, I was a pretty successful member of society by any standard.
Yeah.
So why should I change?
Yeah.
It's working. No, it's not, because there's more. See, today in the work I do, the people that have the most difficult time changing and transforming are the successful ones. People that make, especially people that make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because they believe that they get it right. They don't believe that there's more, because compared to everyone around them, they have more.
Yeah.
But so they have a hard time believing that the life experience can be far beyond.
Yeah.
That's it's a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Yeah.
So essentially, my transformation, the way I think about it, is the power of love. It's the love for my wife and her love to me, and my love for my kids. Because I realized that whatever I don't transform, I transmit. And first and foremost to my kids. And it's like, no, not happening, not on my shift. Yeah. Because I was fear-driven, I was a destructive force. Right? I was a very aggressive type A personality, very aggressive leader, and I achieved a lot because of my aggression. But I also hurt people.
Yeah.
At one of the companies I run, 2 years in, I realized that I have within my team 50% divorce rate.
Wow.
Now, yeah, that's the average in the population, but not within 2 years. So I said to myself, yeah, you think of yourself as a good guy, but that doesn't gel.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. So you're doing something wrong. That was a major slap in the face that I gave to myself. So that influence, the force of love, made me decide that I'm dedicating my life to do good, real good. And that's how it transpired, that transforming myself gradually. And my practice today is all word of mouth. And it grew organically through, initially, friends, family asking my advice, how do I see things, blah, blah, blah. And they started referring people to me. And I was like, okay, I'll meet for coffee this guy, that guy, blah, blah, blah. And before I know it, first I enjoy it a lot more, and people keep coming back.
Yeah.
And my wife doing healing work with women, so some of the women said, do you know somebody to work with my husband?
Yeah.
And that kind of kick-started the process. And that's, talking about living my identity, at some point there was a crossing that I had to say, okay, you're done with tech, not doing that anymore, doing this full-time. Now you're dedicating yourself to this. And that brought me to where I am today.
Yeah. And let's talk about that. What you do. Also a little bit about you do retreats as well. And then how can people get in contact with you? I mean, just putting this out there, and I've talked about it before, that like I had a significant transformation before I met you, but I still had a lot of like garbage in there that needed help, and you've been helping me with that in so many ways, and getting through some of the toughest decisions I've had to make since being free and just in my life. And so you've helped me so much, and continue to. We're still on the journey, and so I just want to put that out there as a person that is actually going through your program and what you have. It's like been so helpful for me. And if anybody looks back at just 10 months ago, and they could see the difference, and if you know me, I've changed a lot, and it's a lot of regions because of you. So I wanted to thank you and share you with whoever's listening to this. Like that's a part of, I feel like, my moral obligation is like when I've been gifted with things or opportunities or people to share it. So would explain what you do and how people can get in contact with you.
Thank you. First, I want to say that I think it takes a lot of courage what you do. And when I had this idea to basically put the work that I do with men online and make it public and used, hopefully you have that inspire people to do the work inside and the really deep work. I knew that I need people that have a lot of courage, that are not afraid, because the most scary work, most scary incidents, and I was fortunate enough to be afraid quite a bit, but I can tell you from my own experience and other people's, the scariest moments are when you go really deep inside. And doing that in front of a camera is, to me, is one of the most courageous things a man can do. And I'm grateful and highly appreciative of the fact that you agreed to do it. And
thank you.
And people can now start finding snippets, and at some point we'll post the whole process. And I think it's remarkable, really remarkable. Very grateful for what you do and how you conduct yourself.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I hope many people will watch it and see how inspiring that process is.
Yeah, and I'll share your YouTube channel in the description of this episode and stuff like that. So if anybody listening, you want to go check it out, you can find him there on YouTube. Doing the work. We're doing the work. We're doing the hard work. But it's been so just powerful for me in my life. So being able to have these get deep, with you on these things and work through them.
I decided to venture on this path because I knew it took me about 13 years to reach the point that I feel comfortable in my skin. Right now, I'm still a work in progress, and I'll always be. But my life is fundamentally different. But I also realized that it doesn't need to take that long. It took me so long because I couldn't find anyone that will guide me through this process. And that's when I realized that the experience that I gained through my own experimentation is actually very valuable for others, and it can shortcut the process by a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you now, people that I work with, from the point that we start until they actually feel some transformation in their life, you can testify. It's usually 2-3 months or less. But it's a longer process to really transform, really release the pain, really deal with the deep fears. That's a longer process. And from my experience this far, depends on how dedicated people are and how honest they are with themselves. It's in the range of 9 to 18 months, and you really have a very different life experience inside of you.
Yeah.
And, the reality changes an outcome of that, your physical reality, your life circumstances, but that's an outcome. Yeah. Your experience inside, it doesn't need to take 13 years, really.
Yeah. And that's the powerful about becoming really going through the transformation yourself and going through the experiences. Now you can take that experience and understanding and put it into something to where it can be done even quicker. Right.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of the time I wasted was trying to figure out where to go, what to do, creating all kinds of practices, pinpointing the problem. Was consumed all of my being for many years.
Yeah.
But distilling from that the things that are more effective and create fast transformation and understanding the process. You know, I wouldn't be able to tell you any of what I said in the last hour without that process, and I wouldn't be able to do this job without it. So that's kind of, I feel, big blessing, including the pain, including the trauma.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for being here, man. And this is just one of more to come, because there's so much more to talk about. So, but I really appreciate you. Thank you.
I'm honored and very grateful for this opportunity and for everything you do. I think it's remarkable, and I'd love to continue this.
For sure. Appreciate it.
Thank you, brother.
I just wanted to say thank you for listening all the way to the end of the episode. I wanted to just give a quick shout out to the sponsors for this podcast in terms of like them allowing us to use their space at Legendary Foods, at the Legendary Studios. I want to give a shout out to them for that. They're amazing product. Also, I want to say that if you're interested in a free PDF version of my book, Warrior in the Garden, 7 Rules for Men, there'll be a link in the description that you can click to get that, as well as to sign up for our weekly newsletter. And I'm always giving new advice and new guidance to help you get through life's challenges, and always keeping you up to date on the new things that we're doing at How to Battle and my company. And so I just want to say thank you for being here and listening. And please remember to subscribe.